Chapter 8 of Mystery at Number 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Mystery at Number 6 by Augusta Huiell Seaman. Chapter 8. Charred Pages. Bernice looked at it with curiosity and awe. Never before had she been so close to a mystery. With fingers that shook a little from excitement, she unfolded the wrappings and brought to light a few dirty and discoloured pages, looking as though they had been torn from a fair-sized notebook. They were blackened and charred with fire all around their edges, and so far in that often words were indistinguishable. And they were covered with fine and precise handwriting, still legible where the fire had not interfered. Bernice was eager to examine them closer, but the wind, caused by the speed of the car, blew them about and made the task almost impossible. Furthermore, Sydney warned them that it was about time to land Delight near her home. "I am going to beg a great favour," said Bernice, taking a sudden determination. "Will you allow us, Delight, to take these papers home with us and examine them at our leisure tonight? Perhaps we may be able to make something out of them that even you have not made. We will keep them just as safely as you would, and will return them to you tomorrow." "You promise that you won't show them to anyone?" questioned the girl in hesitation. "I feel that somehow I ought not to share this secret with anyone, but I trust you so much." "You can depend upon it, Delight," Bernice assured her. "I have never broken a promise yet." "Then take them," and Delight thrust them into her hands again. "If you'll meet me tomorrow afternoon near the largest palmetto clump across the pool from the house, I'll be there." As they neared the opening to the trail that led to the pool, Delight asked them to let her out there so that she might walk the rest of the way. "I'd feel safer that way," she said, and added, "Oh, there is one thing more I forgot to tell you, Bernice. The word on the cover of the book. I could not keep the cover. It was too big and hard. I was afraid it would be found out, but I remembered the word. It was Journal. I am not very sure I know what it means, but good bye. I mustn't stay another minute," and she hurried down the trail. "Drive home like the wind, Sid," commanded Bernice when she was out of sight. "I've so much to tell you that I'm just about bursting, and I can't do it till we can be quiet somewhere." When they got to the hotel, Sydney suggested going on to his bungalow for the proposed colloquy, but Bernice voted against it. She knew that her mother was visiting his mother that day and that they would have difficulty finding a place where they could be undisturbed. Then Sydney suggested a live oak grove half a mile down the road, but Bernice voted that down also. "It will be hot there," she decided, "and there's no comfortable place to sit. Let's just get rocking chairs and go in the east corner of the hotel veranda. It's nice and shady there, and a good breeze and absolutely no one about at this time of day." And so they did. Before examining the papers, Bernice retailed to her cousin every word she could remember of the long account Delight had given her of her past history. Sydney listened with absorbed attention, but without interruption till she was through. "My word, but that's some earful!" he exclaimed slangily, but in deadly earnest nevertheless. "Hand over those papers, quick! I want to see what we can make of 'em. Guess you were right, old girl. There sure is some mystery here." Again Bernice undid the packet of charred papers. She said the book cover that she destroyed had the word journal on it, so it's not difficult to guess what these must be, she commented, before they proceeded to examine them critically. Then with bated breath they gave themselves to the study of the charred pages. After a long interval Bernice looked up, an expression of blank dismay in her grey eyes. "But, Sid, what does this all mean? I can't make head or tail out of it. Look here, for instance. It reads, 'Air roots of ficus aura become fused together when remain pressed in contact. Cases of natural inarching, very unusual. Coccolobis florienda in abundance on this hammock. Ground in this region probably lifted after great Pleistocene subsidence. The Bursera and some of the Eugenias are second migrants.' I just can't make anything out of it at all." "I know," agreed her cousin. "It is pretty confusing. But I'm beginning to think I see daylight. Somebody has evidently been making notes. Naturalists or geologists or botanists' notes about something, somewhere, probably in the Glades, by the look of it. I don't wonder the poor kid was rather mixed up by all this. Naturally she couldn't understand a word of it, just like so much Greek to anyone who hasn't studied that sort of thing." "But do you suppose it's all just this?" cried Bernice disgustedly. "What's the use of wading through it? There are quite a number of pages." "You can't tell about that. If it were a journal, perhaps there might be some other entries, more personal ones. And if that's the case, we can't afford to miss them. They might explain something, you know." "Well, let's look 'em all through then," sighed Bernice resignedly. "We can skip lightly over the scientific parts. Here, you take that bunch and I'll go over this one. If we don't come across something in that way, I give it up." They settled down to quiet and silent study of the closely written and now all but illegible notes. Suddenly Bernice sat up with a start. "Look here! See what I came across? Right in with a lot of incomprehensible stuff. Found the child Delight with a perfect specimen of the Cryptopodium punctatum, a native epiphytal orchid, in her tiny hand this morning. She must have picked it off the bark of tree under which she was sitting, attracted by the colours, no doubt. Cried when I took it away." "The child Delight! There can't be any mistake about that," cried Sydney. "But who can the person be that's writing, and what relation to her, if any?" "Doesn't sound like any near relation, I must say. But you're not the only person that has discovered something. Listen to this. The inutility of all this grows upon me. I have no longer any desire to live. When it's all over with me, what's to be done about her? But she shall not go back. 1,000 times no. There's a whole bookful in that little item, if we only had the key to it," commented Sydney wisely. "Somebody's tired of playing the game, and the little kid is going to be the sufferer. I'm quite convinced now that there's been something queer somehow." In growing excitement they continued to scan the scraps of paper, sure that every other word or line would bring further enlightenment. But they were doomed to disappointment, except for one further little personal item. There was not another clue to anything in all the maze of incomprehensible Latin, botanical, and geological allusions. This item arrested the eye of Bernice, just as she was about to throw down the remainder of her papers in despair. "I have paid Jerry generously for what he is to do. He did not wish it so. But the future is the future and must be provided for. It is the wisest solution. The child must be kept from want at least, but she must never know what I have known." "That's the most enlightening thing yet," she declared, when she had read it to Sydney. "Do you know, I have a brand new idea about this whole thing. What she told us, combined with this, has made me certain that Jerry Saw Grass has been paid by somebody to get rid of her, to do away with her somehow or other, because she wasn't wanted where she belonged. There have such things happened, you know there have. But why he hasn't done it yet, I can't quite understand. Oh, she's in awful danger, that poor little thing, and you were trying to tell me only today that she didn't need our help." "Oh, wait a minute," exclaimed Sydney, his head in his hands. "You talk so fast and hard I can't even think. You do jump at conclusions in the most illogical way, too. Jerry Saw Grass hasn't the faintest intention of doing away with her, as you so cheerfully express it. Nor has he ever been asked to, probably. Those bloodthirsty deeds aren't pulled off quite as frequently as you seem to imagine. I have another explanation, and I hope a more sensible one. There's one thing maybe you don't know, but I've heard of it a good many times, especially since I lived in Florida. The Everglades are a great hiding place and shelter for a certain class of people, escaped criminals and those who are dodging the law for some reason best known to themselves, deserting soldiers and a heap more of a like variety. Mightn't it be likely, then, that the one who made those notes was a fugitive from justice, or something of the kind, living in the Glades and chumming around with Jerry? What in the world he'd have a child with him for, I can't imagine, though I can easily see, if he did, how he'd want that child protected, perhaps from the consequences of his wrong-doing, and even kept in ignorance of the whole affair as it grew up." "Yes, that certainly seems more sensible, Sid," admitted Bernice meekly. "You do know a lot more than I, and yet I hate to think of that dear little Delight being connected in some way with a criminal." "The weak point in the argument," mused Sydney, "is where all this scientific business comes in. I somehow can't picture anyone with criminal tendencies being so absorbed in the fauna and flora and all that sort of thing of the Glades, and making elaborate notes about them. No, there's a screw loose in that argument somewhere." "Well, anyhow, I think it's the best explanation we've struck yet," declared Bernice. But suddenly she sat up very straight and caught her breath. "Sydney Conant, if we really think that, what are we going to say to little Delight tomorrow? I just couldn't tell her any such supposition as that." "Don't say anything about it, of course. It would be cruel to put such an idea into her head. Have you thought what connection that man, that Mr. Tredwell, may have with all this?" Sydney demanded, suddenly going off on a new track. Bernice looked blank. "Really, I'd forgotten all about him," she acknowledged. "Such a lot has happened since. What do you think about it?" "I think there's some very close connection," he admitted. "Jerry recognized him and was wild to get out of his way. Jerry knows him and fears him for some reason. Therefore, I'm not drawing too long a bow, as they say, when I take the liberty of thinking Mr. Tredwell has some bearing on things. I'm going to watch him and, what's more, I'm going to cultivate his acquaintance. Something may come of it." The next afternoon they drove over to Number 6 to keep the tryst with Delight, the precious packet ready to be handed back into her keeping. When they reached the pool, they reconnoitred carefully to be sure they might not be observed by the occupants of the farmhouse on the other side, but as no one was in sight anywhere, they sat down in the shadow of the big scrub palmetto clump designated by Delight, and waited. The time drifted by as imperceptibly as the few light, downy clouds above the pool that scarcely seemed to move in the immeasurable depths of the blue sky. Cardinals and mocking birds sang and flirted their tails at them. A moccasin snake, asleep near the edge of the pool, uncoiled himself presently and slipped into the water. Even the old alligator appeared, his head like a mere floating log on the surface of the pool near the middle. And still delight did not come. Whole battalions of fish drifted by, idling infuriatingly near the shore. Sydney set a line for them and caught one or two. Suddenly, however, he could stand it no longer. "You stay here," he commanded, rising and preparing for departure. "I'm going to slip around the pool, keeping under cover, and just get over near the house and see what's the matter. There's something unusual about it. She hasn't usually kept away like this. Maybe she's sick, or someone else is, or an accident or something. I'll be back presently." He slipped away behind the bushes and was soon out of sight, while Bernice remained, patiently watching. From where she sat she could not see what he did when he reached the other side of the pool. Indeed, he had no intention that she should, for if he were visible to her, he would also be visible to the dwellers in the house. Sooner than she expected he came scurrying back, singularly enough without much precaution for keeping out of sight, and breathlessly he seized her arm. "If you want to see something strange, come with me and be quick about it." Chapter 8.